Zach with Service Training, and in this video we're going to use the Symbio Service and Installation app to adjust our protocol or communication settings. So from the home screen we can navigate over to Tools and we can find our protocol configuration selection and go ahead and touch on that gray arrow, and then we see some basic information that tells us how the unit is currently configured. If we need to make changes, we can just touch the edit and the screen pops up, and now we have some green text that allows us to make changes. So device name is just that. How are we going to see this device on our communicating network, our BACnet network? We can come in, touch up there at the text, we can use the delete, we can make changes, keep it where it was, we can edit it and name it. Basically, generally, however the blueprints or the specification call out the piece of equipment. Under protocol, we can touch there, and now we can make selections as to, are we doing BACnet over MSTP, are we doing BACnet over IP, or AirFi, and are we doing BACnet over IP? So either one, move the check mark to the appropriate protocol, and then we can hit the apply button. I'm going to go ahead and leave mine on MSTP. And the next selection is our baud rate. The devices can only talk as fast as the slowest device on the link. Trained devices default to 76,800, and that's what we have selected. If we needed to make a change, we could again select the appropriate baud rate for the system or network that we're talking on, and then we could hit apply. I'm going to go ahead and leave mine at 76,800. Hit the apply button. So go ahead and hit the done button there. And then under our device ID information, currently our device ID is 0 and our rotary dial settings are 0. The rotary dial settings would match whatever the rotary dials are adjusted to on the Symbio 700 controller itself. And with both of those, the rotary dial being 0, the device ID being 0, makes sense. If for some reason we need to use a software device ID, we first have to tell the controller that we want to do that by toggling the Use Software ID toggle from Node ES, and then we scroll down just a little bit and we've got Software Device ID. And if we touch over here, we can give it a software device ID, or some would call this a soft set ID. So I'm just gonna give it a number within the device ID range for BACnet. This is generally going to be provided or set up by or through the building automation folks, or the building automation contractor will have this information, and this will be something they will want to adjust. Once we have it set, we can hit done. We see our information is all where we want it. We go ahead and finally hit apply, and it should save the information. And we go back in and we can see cabinet unit, or cabinet condensing unit 1, protocol BACnet over MSTP, baud rate of 76,800, and our current device ID is 12101, and it is a software device ID. So that is adjusting your BACnet or protocol configuration using the Service and Installation app. The next item that we can adjust or change while we're in the tools is the IP configuration. So if this device was going to be a BACnet over IP device and be placed on a building network, we could come in here under IP configuration and make the adjustments necessary. Give it a second to load here. The big ones to point out here are, first of all, this is the status of the IP configuration. This is how it is currently set up. So our host name is Symbio 700 and our Ethernet port's enabled, and we've got a bunch of information here about our IP settings. Generally, these settings are provided by the customer's IT or network personnel. So you wouldn't just really make these up as you go. You would have some information that would need to get put in here. So we're gonna go ahead and click up here on the pen, and that gets us into the edit screen. We could again touch up there on host name and change that host name if we needed to. This is the name that the device would be shown as on the network. And then here's where we can enable or disable that Ethernet port. Some facilities may not want that Ethernet port enabled or able to be used, so we can actually come in here and essentially turn it off. So even if something were plugged in, it really wouldn't serve any function. We're going to go ahead and leave it enabled. And then our next selection is configure IP address. It's defaulted to DHCP, Dynamic Host Control Protocol, which means get your IP address from the server. Most of the time, this will probably be set to static, but not always. If we need to set it to static, this is where we come in and change that, and then make sure we hit the apply button. And we've got some red text because we have some invalid information. So we have to actually provide it an IP address because that's what we've set it up for by making our selection static. So we just go ahead and touch on that IP address tab, and we can put in the numbers that are given to us by the IT group. So I'm going to just kind of make one up. I'm just going to go with a 192.168.1.101. I'm going to make that the IP address of this controller. The subnet mask, typically that's 255.255.255.0. And then the default gateway is typically going to be similar to your IP address, but not the same. So we're going to give it a 192.168.1.0. We can do that. And go ahead and hit done. And we're going to leave our DNS set to manual. And we've got everything set. We're going to go ahead and hit the save button. And then this will basically save the IP configuration into our controller, and then our device will be ready for use on the customer building owner's IP-based network. So that's adjusting your BACnet and or your IP settings using the Symbio service and installation app on a Symbio 700 controller. If you haven't seen other videos in our service and installation app series, you can find a link to the playlist here. And be sure to check out any of those videos that you may have missed or maybe you want to go back and review. And be sure to like and subscribe to this channel to keep up to date on more content as we make it available.